Hi, welcome to January's version of Dynamic Dialogue, first of our series for 2024. We're going to be monthly this year, the fourth Thursday of the month. And this is the fourth Thursday. It's not the last Thursday, but it is the fourth. And we're going to cover a wide range of topics. I take suggestions for topics and ideas, and they come from kind of all over. So today, we're going to talk about what is in store for supply chains in 2024. No rhyme necessarily intended there, but that's what we got. Again, these are our monthly dynamic dialogues. We talk about lots of things, and the link that you have for today is good through the end of the year. You can sign up and register. No need to do that. I will send out the flyers, but if you register, then you get fewer emails and you will be able to track our topics going forward. So I'm going to talk first about some of the trends, and there's a lot of pundits out there talking about what's going on in supply chain in 2024. And I see a lot of recurring themes. I see a lot of these things going on. Um, a lot of what's companies are looking for is transparency and visibility. And we are used to doing that with tier one and tier two suppliers, and maybe even a little more into tier two since the pandemic when we got caught flat-footed. A lot of companies did with a lot of different challenges. But now we're looking beyond that. Companies are looking across the extended supply chain to say, where are my key suppliers? What are the things that are what are the risks that are looking there? What is going to get me? How do I make sure that I'm set up to be successful? Especially this time of year when companies really do a lot of reset. A lot of companies are doing categorization this time of year, reviewing their whole supply base and understanding what's working for them, what's not, which suppliers maybe should be given a little more attention or a little less attention or maybe replaced, and which suppliers are coming in new from maybe new products or new requirements that need to have some relationships built. So we're really looking deep into that. Companies are also looking deeper than ever before, and anytime they have a disruption for quality issues, for any time of lead time growth, and I've seen lead times just get out of control the last few years. Uh, Lead times that were 8, 10, 12 weeks are now sometimes 60 weeks, 60 weeks after, more than a year. There's just no controlling that, I think. I used to say that was one of the things that was fairly stable was lead times, and I can't say that anymore. As much as cost changes, lead times change too. We still see delayed and late shipments, some from suppliers due to a supplier issue, some because of freight and transportation issues, but a lot of that is still going to be happening. So this is what companies are looking for. They want to understand what's going on with those issues and to be able to address them. We have a lot of technology tools that companies are looking for around supplier relationships. You've got technology tools that will help you craft relationship models, will help you do spend analysis, will help you do a lot of different things, track your supply chain architecture, all those things. And then we're looking to meet ESG goals. That's something that is not going away. There's a lot more requirements on companies today, and the environmental, the governance issues they just seem to keep piling up. So we'll look at a few of those. And companies are realizing they need to do things like traceability and definitely risk identification, risk mitigation, risk avoidance, risk elimination. All of those types of activities I'm seeing on clients and other companies on their goals for 2024. So a lot of deep diving into the supply chain and still learning more and trying to identify what's going on and what could go on that might be an impact to us. There's a lot of press on digital technology type things. Artificial intelligence, you can hardly pick up a supply chain article on anything that doesn't talk about artificial intelligence. And this is talked about in terms of streamlining processes, helping to optimize management of inventory, looking at your overall productivity and efficiency of the operations, whether it goes from your purchasing organization through your planning organization, production, manufacturing, and all of your support services, all of that. So AI is one of the hot topics. Another hot topic is blockchain. This is a great technology, a great idea to help the transparency, security, traceability that companies are looking for and want to enhance in their supply chain and across their supply chain. With blockchain, you get these immutable records that are created, so it really reduces counterfeiting and fraud, and it allows you to track everybody that puts their fingers on something. And then it also includes these smart contracts that are much easier to administer and manage in a lot of ways, and they have lower costs associated, and it builds trust. So a great technology, again, that can be employed in a lot of different ways across and throughout the supply chain. Internet of Things, yet another buzzword, if you will. A lot of press on this as well, with looking at the data analytics, the real-time visibility, understanding how companies are planning, and putting the data together to try to figure out what that means, to try to get information from the data to identify bottlenecks before they actually happen or before they get catastrophic. And it really does help companies be proactive. All these are great things, and I almost every article I looked at between about November and in the last couple of weeks, when they talk about supply chains in 2024, they use these all over. Every article is peppered with this. Artificial intelligence everywhere, blockchain, Internet of Things, data analytics, all of these. And these are great tools, they're great ideas, they're great things, but they do require a lot of investment and also a lot of training, because most professionals, just a supply chain professional, a buyer, a planner, even a purchasing manager, doesn't necessarily know what these things are at a usable level. And if they do, they don't understand how they can actually employ them in their work. And if they have ideas for that, then they still have to go get the funds from the company in order to be able to implement these things. It's not like you can buy a software package that's artificial intelligence and that's one and done. And it's a lot of training for organizations that don't have inherent people that are keeping up with these things. And it's it's going to be a lot of training. It's going to be implementing. It's going to be changing some of the way things are done, some of the processes, the procedures, and just getting everyone up to speed on this. So while these are great things to be thinking about and learning about, I find that many companies just are not equipped to start digging into what they can do with artificial intelligence and blockchain. If you're a large company, a large corporation, yes, you're way ahead of the curve on this. But for many of their smaller suppliers and their lower tiers of their supply chains, it's going to take a while to get there. So I've talked to several different people who say, I don't know how we're going to do this. We don't know how to go get artificial intelligence. And what I say is, it's okay. You can take a breath. You don't have to be able to put this in by March to be successful in 2024. You do need to understand what's going on in these technologies, in these systems. You need to understand what your partners are doing, what your customers are doing, what your suppliers are doing with these tools, and how you can possibly integrate with them. But it's not something that you have to do today. And I don't think money companies will fall far behind if they don't actually even start to integrate these in this calendar year. But there is more going on in this area. There's a lot of companies that are embracing these types of technologies and working to put them in their systems. And if that's your customer, if that's your supplier, if that's your competitor, then you need to understand what they're doing, at least on a high level, to make sure that you don't get run over by these technologies. So what I say is closer to home for a lot of other companies. There's still a lot of supply chain trends that we're seeing. Cost reduction is always in fashion for supply chain people. We're always looking to see how we can reduce the expenses that we have, the expenses that we incur from producing the goods and services of our company. So that involves better forecasting and demand planning. These tools that I just talked about, the Internet of Things, the blockchain, and the AI can really help enhance the forecasting techniques that companies use and therefore help them do better demand planning. So we want to be looking at things that we can do to piggyback on that, to learn about that, to incorporate whatever, again, our suppliers and customers are doing so that our own forecasting gets better and our demand planning systems are being enhanced. Cash management is another area where companies are really, really looking down deep. We don't always think about that from the supply chain perspective of looking at the cash, but companies are doing that a lot more. They're mapping out their cash flows. They're trying to understand more detail about that. They're trying to manage them more closely, which is, in my book, it's better than trying to manage the stock price at a micro level. So I think you're going to get more return on that investment if you're managing your cash. There's a lot of predictive tools. Again, we go back to the slide that we had before with all the technologies, because companies do not want to have stockouts. They don't want to have disruptions. They don't want to be down for any reason. And so any kinds of tools that we can pull in to help us do that and manage the risk there is going to be a good thing. And we're also looking for faster transactions between all these systems that connect. And even if they don't connect, we're trying to figure out how we can get that connectivity from end to end in the supply chain, because there's several different companies involved in almost every supply chain. And there's lots of different data that's been collected, assimilated, compiled, shared, all those kinds of things. So we want to make sure that we have we're looking at those systems. We're trying to understand how to connect those systems. And then the other thing that I keep hearing about is resilience, and along with that is risk management. So we're trying to manage the risk so we can be more resilient, meaning we can respond more quickly, we can be more agile, more flexible. We're able to deal with whatever the world throws at us. So we're looking at a lot of techniques to manage risk. That includes contingency planning, risk avoidance, risk identification, risk mitigation strategies, looking at how we can, how we can manage those risks versus them turning into a lot of disruptions. So even if we have to be a little more flexible, make a few more changes in our production plans, make a few more changes to our forecast, we want to make sure we can reduce the number of disruptions that we have. And if we do have the disruptions, we want the impact to be minimal. There's a lot of ways to do that, and companies are embracing strategies like diversifying their supply base. Okay, I have suppliers in China. Should I have one somewhere else as well in case something goes wrong with China? Japan just had another major earthquake that's causing some problems in different areas. We have weather issues all across the country. I've talked to people in the Midwest who've had ice storms, people on the East Coast and the Northwest that have had snow and all kinds of weather issues. Hurricane season is expected to be not so great again, so that could be a problem. So we're looking at, where are the suppliers? Do I have all my eggs in one basket with that? Do I have a single supplier? Even though I might be able to have more than one, do I have a second, a dual source, a backup source? And if I do, then how quickly could I change from one to the other? If I don't, then I'm looking to see, can I find a backup supplier? Even if you don't have enough volume to do dual sourcing, maybe you have enough sheet metal parts that you can consolidate into 2 sheet metal houses, and then they at least know how to do business with you. Give half your parts or some portion of your parts to one supplier, half of the business or some portion to the other supplier, and then if one has problems, you can move things around. I've seen companies who have lots of manufacturing in China saying, I can't move it back to the States in entirety because it's going to be too expensive. So maybe what I can do is to bring a small percentage back to the United States. It's going to be more expensive, but that will help me with inventory because I have a local source or something closer to home. I can offset the cost with the cheaper parts that I can get from Asia, whether it's China or another Asian country, and I can manage the inventory because I can flex and get parts more quickly because they're closer. If I have a shipping hiccup, or there's something at the port that holds things up, or the supplier has issues, or all of those things that have happened in the past, companies are looking to say, what can I do to make sure that I don't get brought to my knees for that? So we're looking at a lot of ways to diversify locations, the suppliers, the sources themselves. What can we do with the supply base to make sure that it is handling the challenges that we're experiencing in business today? Inventory continues to be an issue. It seems like a lot of companies still don't have the inventory levels that they would like, or don't have that assurance of supply flow of inventory being consistently into the factory to meet the requirements. So how do we improve that assurance of supply? What kinds of buffers can we do? What kind of planning can we do? What kind of tools are there, again, that can help us forecast those and avoid those shortages? Or what can I do about buffering inventory? So companies are looking at buffering inventory, not only taking on sole responsibility for that, but they are buffering inventory. They're asking suppliers to buffer some inventory. They're asking lower level suppliers to have extra material available if and as needed over some period of time. So there could be a cost to this over time, but if it gets used up in a reasonable amount of time and it doesn't cost the company who's providing that buffer very much space or very much cash tied up, and that goes along with continuing orders, then many companies are willing to do that. They're willing to hold an extra 10% of something, or at least a key component of what they're making, 10% of that component, in order to help the lead time and to help put some buffer in the inventory and reduce the lead time and be more responsive and more flexible. So that's where the supplier relationships come in. So you can have those candid conversations with your suppliers and talk about what the challenges are, understand where their pain points are now and potentially, and put some strategies together and some plans, again, with tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, maybe all those suppliers at one table, talking about how to manage a certain part or a certain component that you need for your final assembly. And it's important that we are able to look at different scenarios. We are able to do different simulations. And again, that's where the technology can come in to help you do those things and do lots of scenarios, lots of different contingency plans. If you don't have the technology, it doesn't mean that you can't do that kind of planning and do those kinds of analyses. You can. It just takes a little longer and it's a little more manual, but it's the thought process to go through that you need to go through. Even if you have the tools, you need to ask yourself those questions to be able to set up those tools to help you manage the inventories and avoid the risk impacts that you're trying to avoid. So another thing that companies are doing this year, and we hear sustainability about every third word. After we hear AI, I think sustainability is the one I hear the most. Maybe resilience is in there too. But sustainability is a big, important topic. It's a big, important platform for companies. And we're all trying to think about how can we be eco-friendly? How can we be responsible? So companies are looking at alternate fuels, electric vehicles, all kinds of different things, solar heating and cooling, so solar panels, reclaimed water for things. Some of this is not new. Some of this is just a continuation of what companies have been doing. And then some companies are trying to kick it up to another level and be even more responsible in this area. So whatever part of the country that you're in, and whatever your challenges are, this is a big issue. And one of the things we've always talked about with sustainability is the packaging. And yet sometimes we limit that to the outside package and we don't look at the inside packaging and say, okay, what's going on in here? We're using a recycled box to put for a carton, and that's working well. And we don't have colored labels. We're back to black and white, kind of plain generic looking labels. But then you go into the package and you'll see plastic this, plastic that, plastic that's not recyclable. We're seeing pumps and things like that that are not necessarily easy to handle from a green perspective. So then we have to look at those things. We're trying to get our customer loyalty, and we want our suppliers to be loyal to us. We want our brands to be strong. And so we're looking at all of those things so we can be more sustainable throughout. And one big tool that I'm also hearing a lot about is circular supply chains. So circular supply chains really are looking at a zero waste perspective, and they're trying to say everything that doesn't go into my product gets used, added value through another process, another company, another usage. So we aren't just looking at throwing things in the landfills, and even basic recycling, we're kicking that up a notch and saying, okay, we know that a lot of things that we put in that recycle bin don't actually get recycled. They used to be shipped on a lot of ships over to Asia, and Asia quit taking a lot of that. And so there's a lot of this stuff floating around kind of from place to place. So what can we do about that? How can we reduce that? So all of that works together, and that's a big topic for 2024. We hear a lot about ESG, the environmental, social governance issues. There's lots of new laws coming in. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce this one, but I think it's been pronounced WEJR, which is the Forced Labor Prevention Act that has to do with the area around China where they have basically identified slave labor. So there's a new law that Congress passed that says make sure that you're not using any products in your products or any services that come from this slave labor area or any other slave labor that might be in existence somewhere in the world. So that's a really tough one. It's much akin to the Dodd-Frank or the conflict minerals law, which says go find out where all the minerals, the tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold are in your products. Go find out where they were mined and who mined them and how that got to be. So it's really great ideas and a great intent, but we all know in the corporate world, sometimes it's really hard to implement these and get down to the level that is being asked of us. There's also a German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. That's another one that's coming on. There's other ones that Congress is talking about. I guess the good news is that Congress hasn't been able to pass a lot of laws this year. Some of the things I saw were that some of the lowest number of laws passed in the history of the country, and even yet some of those were like changing the names of this changing the name of this building or that building or whatever. So some of the things that they passed were minor impact to the rest of us, to the greater good of the world. But so I know that will not last, and they will get back to passing a lot of laws to try to see what they can do to make our lives more challenging. The labor practices in general, that's a big issue. It always has been through Asia. It's been an issue through all the times I was in the corporate world going to Asia looking for possible labor, underage labor, unsafe labor. I always tell my students, my college students, that OSHA doesn't exist in other countries, and the safety practices that we have here that we kind of take for granted do not apply necessarily around the world. And so you have to find companies who take that responsibility on to make things safe and to have good working conditions for their employers. And we're even seeing some areas here in the United States where the child labor laws are being revamped so that it makes it easier for companies to hire children and make them work longer hours. By children, I say under the age of 16. And so there's a lot of this in the news, and you should keep an eye on that because the rest of the world is, and the supply chain people are keeping an eye on that. What is going on with supply chains and how does that affect our business? And the ESG really aligns with risk reduction goals and strategies that you're trying to do to reduce your risk as a company through lots of different areas of risk. So it's important that you have these kind of compliance areas. And I'm putting together a workshop on how any kind of company, any size, can put together a compliance program and make sure that you stay in compliance, not only with the government and the regional, state, local, international laws, but that you stay in alignment with your company's values and mission and goals. And that should come up probably in the second quarter, sometime between April and the end of May, maybe June. So we'll have more on that. Supplier focus is another area that I'm seeing a lot in supply chain. So companies, again, this is the time companies do, and this is the time I recommend my clients do their categorization. Let's get a list of all the suppliers you've used, not only in the last year, but the last 2 or 3 years. Let's look at those. Let's do a deep dive, not just a spend analysis. Spend analysis is great. And I say, I've done lots of webinars on that. It's a great place to start, but you really have to dig into these suppliers and say, where is my needle moving with these suppliers? Which ones are key to my being able to meet my goals for the year? Which ones really are standard suppliers that and single suppliers that we can get lots of, we can easily replace. We don't have a lot of issues around that. Which ones are the sole sources? Which ones are the critical to us for technology? I look at intellectual property, lots of different areas to say who's really important to my business and how am I going to protect that and make sure that that relationship is good. My goals are set with that supplier and we're working well together for the over this year and building relationships that are going to last in the future. So a lot of companies have said we're going to reduce their supply pool, but conversely, some others say we don't have enough redundancies. We don't have enough backup. So now we're going to go change and modify our suppliers. We might end up reducing, we might not. We might add a few, but if we add a few key ones, then that is on purpose and we know why we're doing that. At the same time, if you are doing that, you can probably find a couple of areas where you can reduce or consolidate your suppliers and keep your pool relatively the same or be able to reduce it overall. Consolidating spend is another area companies are looking at. I talked before about companies that are getting like dual sourcing. We're going to do some sourcing here in the US. We're going to do some sourcing in another area, and we're looking at how we can consolidate that spend to make sure that the average price we get, and it's not a 50-50 split, it might be an 80-20 or a 90-10 split, but we're going to look at what that consolidated spend looks like. We're going to look at the tooling involved, the requirements that we have to do, what risks is it creating, what risks is it addressing, and how does that look overall for my company. So when we need these redundancies or when we choose to invest in these redundancies, we want to make sure that we're getting the payback that we should on these kinds of things. Really looking at the supply base, honestly, candidly, and discussing this with key stakeholders within the organization. Another thing is once you understand which suppliers are these key and critical ones, you want to make sure you're collaborating with them, you're meeting with them on a regular basis, you're sharing your goals, you're sharing your key events that are coming up, and making sure that you're working together on that. That's sharing your forecast, doing some joint demand planning, looking at your goals for both ESG and DEI. DEI is getting slammed around these days. Some proponents and some people saying that it's not good. But I think it's always important when you're dealing with people from other areas of the country, other areas of the world, other industries, that you have to consider some of the DEI foundational things and make sure that you're evaluating this and making sure your relationships stay positive and moving forward. So there's supply chain, there's diversity, and there's diversification. Diversification is, as I talked about before, making sure you might have some dual sources, some different sources or backups, and making sure that all that's working together. Circular supply chains, I talked about a little bit more. Again, these involve suppliers a lot because it doesn't help your company to say, okay, we want to go put circular supply chains in, unless you evaluate what your suppliers and your customers are doing in regards to this and find out where they can help. You can share things. You can look at where the waste is coming from the suppliers to you, from you to your customers, and then figure out what you can do to reduce that. Because it really does involve the entire supply chain. You can't look at just one entity in that, being wherever you are in your own supply chain. Typically, we're in the middle in our supply chain with customers on one side, suppliers on the other. But you have to look across that for some of these initiatives to say, how can we do this? Lean Six Sigma, very much the same. If you put a lot of good quality controls in your business, but your suppliers don't have the same mindset, the same tools, the same process, the same approach to quality as you do, you're going to be fighting quality issues forever. And if you're doing a lot of that and your customers aren't appreciating that, aren't rewarding you for that, aren't giving you more business, then you need to make sure that you are aligned with that and you're not overcharging yourself for things that are not necessary to your customers. I'm a little bit loath to say that, and I've had people gasp when I say that, but it's true that you really don't want to spend more on quality than your customers are willing to pay for. So how do we make sure that we stay aligned with all of this and that our quality is as high as it needs to be, but it's also in the reasonable area for our customers, and we're translating that down to our suppliers and our requirements there. And then partnering. The last really trend that I'm seeing a lot, companies are really looking at partnering. They're focusing on their own internal key activities. They're doing another deep dive into, what do we do? What do we have staff for? Where are our facilities and what do we do with those facilities and what kind of value are we getting out of that? And one of the things that I see is many companies are looking for more 3PL, 4PL, even 5PL partners. So they're looking for companies who can manage the inventories, manage the fulfillment end of things, manage the shipping and logistics. We've seen this happen for a while with companies, but now many companies are looking at more to expand into more partnerships with companies who can do those things so they can focus on their manufacturing and their internal manufacturing, or they're looking for more contract manufacturers so they don't have to do the manufacturing in-house. They can pay an expert company in that field, get a little bit better quality, and do some things. So it's outsourcing. It's not necessarily offshoring. If it is offshoring, then they're looking for where are these, again, partners who can help me with any number of things and challenges and help me reduce my risk, shore up my supply chain so that it's more resilient, more agile, more flexible, all of those words that we're going to continue to hear about through the course of the year. Hiring is still going on. There's a lot of companies that are hiring, and companies that are not hiring are still looking for investments in training, trying to upskill their workforce. As I said before, all these technologies, blockchain, circular supply chains, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, data analytics, Those are all great. And guess what? Many of the workers in companies today don't have the ability to incorporate all of that. It doesn't mean that they can't be trained in order to do that, but to bring those types of technologies into the company is going to require some training. There's so many different, again, requirements around compliance that companies are looking for. How do I train my workers to be on the alert for these? How do I make sure that they're staying up with these things? How do we make sure that we're keeping our nose clean and keeping our execs in line with what we're supposed to be doing? So they're starting, companies are using talent scouts and recruiters more to say, I need somebody with this particular skill set. So there, it used to be you're looking for college degrees, maybe master's degrees, generalists. Now they're looking for, I need somebody who knows this about AI that can help me bring this into my workplace. So it's the hiring is good. As we know, the unemployment is very, very low. And so a lot of the people that are looking have skills that do not match, and there's not that many people looking as a whole on a percentage. So and people that do have talents are shopping around. I'm a football fan, and I don't know if any of you are, but this is the end of the season, and so they had the Black Monday a couple weeks ago with the coaches, lots of coaches getting fired. So these are highly skilled people who have done this job for a long time. Those that are good are in a position where they can compete because there's so many teams looking. I think at one point, like 8 teams were looking for new head coaches, and that's 8 out of 32. So when you're looking for a head coach, and they're not just looking for one little coach to augment here or there, they're looking at revamping their entire coaching staff. Some companies are about that drastic. Many companies are not, but they're still looking for key people. So if you have these skills, it is not unheard of for people to be playing one company against the other, trying to get the best that they can out of that, which nobody in a free market, that's how we play the game. But if you don't have those skills, it's a really good time to be getting some training, doing some things different so that you can learn how to handle some of these new technologies that are coming in. Even looking at things like risk-based thinking and critical thinking skills. These, I've talked a lot about skills, and I'm going to talk about skills next month, but it's great to say you need some critical thinking skills. And then if you tell somebody, okay, how do I go get those? Or what does that mean? Like, give me an example of critical thinking. A lot of recruiters and a lot of hiring managers, truthfully, kind of look the other way and hem and haw because they're very hard to define. And yet we know we need critical thinking in our companies. So trying to find people that are talented and can do the things and learn more things is a tough job right now. But the good news is there are jobs. So we need to look at things differently. We've got new systems, outside sources, again, all of these kinds of things. And yet companies are still doing things like basic ISO certifications and making sure they stay up on those. So a lot of things going on there. And so there are a lot of challenges we're looking at. Here at home, we have labor organization unrest. We've seen a lot of that. I myself teach part-time in the California State University system, which the professors, the teachers, lecturers, tenured professors are part of a labor organization, and they called a 1-week strike starting yesterday. So this was the first week of class. I'm teaching actually 3 different classes this semester. I had one scheduled for last night, and over the weekend I had to say, I don't think I'm coming to campus today because the strike, whether I belong to the union or not, whether you support the union or don't, you have to make your decisions on, do you if they say we're striking all week, do you go to campus? Do you teach? Do you not stay home? I talked to several friends of mine who are also teachers, and we all had different perspectives and different processes to make our decisions. Luckily, I think that the last night they reached a settlement. So they've called this the 5-day strike, ended up being a 1-day strike, and they tell everybody to go back to work. The problem is it doesn't just go back to work and you don't just flip that switch, right? It causes disruption. Any classes that were set for yesterday had a disruption. Many classes that were set for today, people made different plans, and they told students, don't come to class, do come to class. Students are always up in the air about, can I crash this class? Can I get into that one? And this first week is always a little bit chaotic anyway, and then add this on top. And so it's kind of crazy. So labor organizations, I think some organizations saw what happened with the Writers Guild, the Actors Guild, the automobile workers, and they all got settlements. They all went on strikes, and some prolonged strikes, but got better deals. So now everybody's saying, well, what about us? How can we do this? And at the same time, there's low unemployment. So that all of that kind of works together. We're seeing wages being increased, which that's part of the strike always is, can we get more wages? But expenses are up too. Inflation hit pretty hard. It's coming down, but it's not coming down fast enough for many of us. But companies are still posting record profits. The stock market hit a new high this week. So whatever that means for you, if you're a shareholder, that's good. But if you're trying to borrow money, it's not so great. If you're trying to do some different things, you're seeing different signals. So a lot of things going on that are volatile and subject to popping up and causing more havoc throughout the year. Consumer demand, that's always a challenge, and it's even more challenging given all of these dynamics going on, markets, aging populations, blah, 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 all of that kind of things we're seeing. And then again, these technology advances, which are great, are expensive. People need training. And then how do I integrate this with all the other stuff that I'm doing? It's a lot. Then we have all of the geopolitical issues. So I've touched on a few of these. This does by no means comprehensive because there's so much. Russia and Ukraine still is active. Lots of impacts there. We're seeing impacts to things like the sunflower oil, the wheat that didn't get grown the last couple of summers because of some of the activity they have. There's still a lot of materials in that part of the world: titanium, lithium, neon, nickel, lots of others that are in Russia, in the Ukraine, that are tougher to get out, that they're charging more for with all the sanctions on Russia. That's driven some things. Fuel, natural gas, and oil, those prices are all over the place. Israel and Hamas, that was I think a shock to a lot of people in October when that happened. If you don't know, Israel is the 27th largest GDP and the 20th, and ranks 20 on the most complex economy. So a lot of people say, it's just Israel. They're small, they're tiny, they're over there. But it is significant in some ways. Some of their top exports: diamonds, chips, oil, medical measuring instruments, a lot of that. And there's been a lot of effort, and it's been global efforts to try to get more business into and through Israel in the last few years. 26% of Israeli exports come to the United States, and their second biggest export location is China. So there's a lot of things that you don't necessarily see without digging into that. And again, companies are understanding their supply chain so they know where those things are. China is flip a coin on that. The relations with the U.S., even though so many companies have manufacturing facilities in China, China's economy is feeling some pain lately. There's some reshoring going on. Human rights is a concern there. China's tariffs, subsidies, all of that. We imposed tariffs on China, but we found out that In the end, a lot of that drove our inflation, and the companies that were importing had to pay those tariffs, not the manufacturers. But we're seeing a lot of churning there. I didn't even mention on this slide Taiwan, which is another one. And you think electronics, you better think Taiwan, because TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, makes a huge percentage of the chips that are used in everything that you buy, from hair dryers to computers, and they make a higher percentage of the real critical ones. There are companies trying to start making their own, but that is not a process that is only a couple months long. That takes a while to do that. So there's other things to keep an eye on. We talk about Asia a lot. I haven't really talked about Europe, even though that's next to Ukraine, and that's all concerning to a lot of people. They have a BRICS alliance, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're adding to that alliance Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, United Arab Emirates. So that could get volatile. There's some countries in there that we're used to dealing with, and there's some new ones in there that could throw a wrench in things. So that's something to keep an eye on. These lead times are still long, especially when you're getting product from Asia, and there's still an awful lot of things being imported from not just China, but all over Asia. Logistics costs are increasing, especially the truckers. Trucking, the American Trucking Association says truck driver shortages will likely surpass 160,000 in the next couple years. It was in 2021, it was about 80,000 shortage that they showed, and they show that doubling over about 10 years. So we're kind of in the middle of that. They're saying now it's about 100 to 120,000 truck drivers short in order to do all the work that we're trying to do. So that's going to continue to be tricky. The demand overall is volatile. And again, we're trying to do better on forecasting and demand management, and yet demand is still volatile as heck. The labor, I talked about the availability of the labor, and then the skill gaps. You might be able to find people, but you can't necessarily find the exact skills that you want. And so there's a lot of constraints in there. And then that doesn't even begin to take on environmental risk, natural disasters, snowstorms, floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, all of those. And then unnatural disasters, sometimes like fires and other terrorist activity that happens, and shootings and things like that that disrupt different workplaces. So a lot of different things to keep an eye on over the course of the year. But there's some good things going on. A lot of the efforts are into increasing the speed of new product implementation, new product introduction and development. So that's all good. More customization, which is helpful to companies who are trying to get a bigger market base or hang on to customers. Companies are seeing the value in long-term supplier relationships. So it's not just as we're going to quote it this year, we'll quote it again next year or in 2 years, and we'll just run through suppliers, every other year, every third year, whatever. They're really looking for long-term relationships. There's rapid technology, just kind of drives everybody crazy. We want to shore up. Here in the United States, we're trying to shore up national supplies of critical items that really got depleted during the pandemic. And things that we found that we didn't have, not only ventilators, but masks and gloves and smocks and things like that. So we live in this VUCA world. And if you don't know that term, I think we should all learn it, because it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So we live in a world that's full of those things, and we need to be aware of that and keep our eyes open and looking around. So companies are continuing to make investments in supply chain. We're seeing that across the globe. I think that's a good thing for any of us in the profession right now. Jobs are available. And that outlook continues to be strong, although it might mean that you need another skill, or you need to enhance something. Sustainability is a good thing, so anybody interested in that should be positioned well. Economists now, there's a few still saying recession, 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 but many are saying, we kind of dodged that bullet and we felt the bubble and it's not going to be devastating. But there's always a point and a counterpoint where some say, yes, we still think the recession is coming. The election year is going to create a lot of pundits coming up with lots of different things and lots of different perspectives, and all of these experts can't agree on too many things. So even economists, all these PhDs in economics don't always come up with the same conclusion. So we have to look at that. But we all know that, and I think one thing we learned from the pandemic is companies really were able to come through based on their relationships or based on their ability to build relationships with other companies at a moment's notice, at the drop of a hat, to make sure that you had some things that would help you get through the tough times. Supply chain flexibility is still everywhere. Every company is still looking to say, how can I be more flexible? How can I be more resilient? How can I reduce my risk? So all of that now is integrated into what we do and what we have to do every day for the rest of our careers. So that's what I have on the 2024 outlook. We're going to continue on the fourth Tuesday of the month at 11:30 Pacific. I hope that works well for everybody. We're going to talk about skills for supply chains. It's supply chain professionals next month. It's February 27th. And then in March, we're going to look at geopolitical and conflict issues. I'm going to take another look at what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, with Israel, with some of the other areas. We'll look at what any effects from this recent earthquake in Japan and whatever else happens between now and then. I have a CPSM class starting February 6th. If you'd like to register, you should register quickly. You can reach out to me at jane@purplelink.net. I'm not sure the website is updated. I asked somebody to help me with that, and it's not been getting done, so I think I need to find someone else. But you can reach out to me and I can give you the link for that class. It meets one night a week from 6 to 7:30 on Tuesdays is what we're doing, starting on February 6th. And it lasts about 12 weeks or so. And that's exam one. So we're starting that. And then, as always, I'd like to leave you with something, strive to thrive. And today it's that the only real constant anywhere is change. So I think we're better off if we all learn to embrace it and just make it part of what we do in our daily routine lives. So that's what I have for you. I'm going to stop the recording, but I will take questions, comments, thoughts.